There's the lady that told you I hit the button. Um, but again, thank you so much. Real quick, if you don't know who I am, which I hope you do, my name is Philip Darden, Executive Director of SORBA. And we've got Dan here, who is the treasurer for SORBA, and Kaysee, who does a bunch of things to do with financial. We hadn't really figured out what her title is, but
Yeah.
she does all the financial stuff for SORBA. And we thought it would be a good opportunity to do some best practices. So I'm going to turn it over to y'all.
Yeah, and Dan,
Awesome.
do you want to go first or we
Yeah. Why don't I start? So first and foremost, if and Brian and Mark, if y'all could just unmute real quick and maybe just say what your title is with Sorbo and which chapter you're with, if you're paying attention.
We've already lost him.
I think we
Nope,
already lost them?
Mark is there. He just tried to unmute.
Yeah, Mark
If
is
not,
on.
we'll keep rolling. Okay. He unmuted and then muted again, so I assume maybe there's some technical difficulties. But um for I'm gonna assume everyone is a leader in their chapter in some way, shape, or form. I also want to assume that everyone is a treasurer, possibly. Maybe for their chapter or involved in some way, shape, or form with the management of your chapter's finances, assets, etc. Um, for most chapters, I hope you have, a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer in some way, shape, or form with those types of officer titles. The treasurer is obviously the person that should be in charge of all of your chapter's finances. This webinar's SORBA session is just best practices. Now, if you've got specific detailed questions after we're done here or at any point in time, whether it's after this or any time in the future, awesome. Mark Morgan, Treasurer, Florida Mudcutters. Cool. Thanks, Mark. Um, if you ever have any questions about finances, taxes, anything to do with your chapter, please feel free to send it to Philip, send it to treasurer@sorba.org. We're happy to get those questions answered, etc. But I kind of want to start as if you don't have a background or you don't know exactly what some of those best practices may be. So to cover some of the most basic ones, some of these, in fact, most, I think all of these are listed in the chapter operations manual. So first and foremost, obviously, as you're receiving any forms of funding, be it credit cards, be it cash, be it checks, whatever it may be, all of those donations need to make sure they're made in the name of the chapter so that they can be allocated appropriately. I hope that your chapter does have a business bank account open somewhere at a local bank or credit union. If you don't have a bank account open for whatever reason, we can chat about that offline because that'll be another series of steps you have to jump through. Other things relevant to your particular state. Here in Georgia, we're required every year to file or refile with the Georgia Secretary of State. That just means that the state of Georgia recognizes us, if you are in Georgia, as a legal entity. Since SORBA Maine is an entity in Georgia, we have to refile that every year. Different states have different regulations. I'm not exactly sure what Florida is. They might be a one and done. Kaysee, do you know, is Florida a one and done?
I can tell you what Florida has to do here. I got a little fancy link.
But
So your annual compliance for Florida is due May 1st.
okay, cool. So you do have to file annually. Typically, that's done through your Secretary of State website. It's very easy. I know in Georgia, you can just log on using your existing EIN, which is going to be your federal EIN, and the name of your organization, and then it's a $50 processing fee every year. I know the government always wants more and more and more, but with Secretary of State, it is pretty important because that is the singular way that any other business entity or individual in Georgia is going to look and make sure you are a legal entity. So when you go try to open up a bank account, the bank in your state's going to go to your state Secretary of State website, take a look, and make sure that you have been filed so that your legal entity. If you have questions about that, obviously, please feel free to ask. But regardless of what state you're in, just look up your state Secretary of State website. Go take care of that.
Not to interrupt, but the link I just put in there, which we could email to everybody too. You just go to that link, click your state, and it tells you everything you have to do as a nonprofit for that.
Nice. See, leave it to the CPA to know exactly where that kind of useful information is. I just always have the Georgia Secretary of State website booked on my bookmarks for all the stuff we have to do with it. Other non kind of bank or state financial best practices. I don't know many organizations that still do write checks, but if you do write checks, if there is check writing going on within your chapter, it's always not a bad idea to have 2 signatures on there. When you order your checks, you can order those from your bank as 2 signature lines. If you don't already have it in your chapter organizational document, so all of the SORBA Maine recommended financial best practices, you can do more than that if your chapter needs to. So right now, I don't believe there's a item in the chapter best practices or in the operations manual that says, hey, anything over this certain dollar amount, you should have 2 signatures or have board approval or whatever it may be, because we just believe everybody in their chapters is communicating on a regular basis. There's chapter meetings going on a regular basis. And if somebody wants to go spend $1,000 on something, you're probably going to talk about that and vote on it before someone goes out and spends those funds. So 2 signatories on a check. I hope that your business bank account is being mailed to the chapter, or bank statement, excuse me, is being mailed to the chapter or being mailed to the treasurer, whoever is treasurer of your chapter, and that statement's just being looked at. To be honest, I have not looked at a bank statement in probably 5 years that wasn't related to a financial review of some kind. I go online, I look at it, I have them e-sent to me all the time, and when we need them, I just log onto the website and can download them. It's not a bad idea if your chapter hasn't done this in a while. You should probably just print out a few of the last bank statements, bring them to your chapter, bring them with you to your chapter meeting, and just pass them around, or have your officers take a look at them. It's financial transparency is extremely important in all nonprofits, especially when you've got multiple hands managing things. Some chapters have a lot going on, a lot of money coming in and out, which is a great thing. But the more money that comes in and out, the more transparency is really necessary to make sure everybody knows what's going on. Additional good best practices. We don't really have anything about credit or debit cards. I don't know that I don't really have an opinion on those as far as an official opinion. Common sense would say that if your chapter is going to have anything like that, that there's some additional financial oversight by the board every month to look at that, make sure it's accounted for, and make sure the bill is paid appropriately. And also, this is kind of something that we sometimes forget. The treasurer should be at hopefully the majority of your meetings, and y'all should be chatting about how things look in the future, if you're going to form a budget for something in particular, and if you're going to be acquiring anything or spending any money. It's not a bad idea to note that in your minutes. So if you don't do or follow Robert's rules, it's not a bad idea. And that's where you have someone makes a motion. If you want to go buy a new Yamaha for $25,000, you make a motion to say, hey, I make a motion that we authorize a Yamaha purchase up to $25,000. Someone seconds that. And then, you say, hey, all in favor, say aye. Everybody says aye. And then you say, hey, do we have any nays? Is there anyone opposed? And no one says no, then the motion passes. And then that's recorded in the meeting minutes. A lot of bank accounts, and if you ever have any kind of audit whatsoever, Kaysee can probably speak to this better than I can. Sometimes those meeting minutes come in handy to be able to show, hey, we said we were going to spend this much. Here's the verification from our meeting minutes where we voted on and approved this type of purchase. It also limits the liability for the officers. That way, if an officer spends $25,001, well, that $1 was not approved, but anything up to that $25,000 was for that Yamaha purchase. And all of these are just general financial best practices. There's also some great best practices. If y'all ever want to look at the most boring website ever, the National Association of Fundraising, or excuse me, National Association for Fundraising Professionals. Jen can speak to that. And there's also a general set of guidelines for some financial best practices on one of the national nonprofit websites. I've got it saved somewhere. I'll have to go find it and share it in the chat while maybe Kaysee's talking. And all of this has to do with just the general day in, day out operations of how your chapter should be managing your finances, depending on how complex, how much money you've got to manage, etc. That's not to do with the taxes. That's going to be more Kaysee's section of the presentation. And I would rather, I could sit here and talk all day about financial best practices. But I would also maybe like to save some time at the end, Brian or Mark, if there's any questions that y'all may have, we can obviously touch on those. One of the questions that has come up at the last two major meetings, the fall meeting in Alabama and the spring SORBA summit we just had a few weeks ago in Noonan, a lot of chapters are fortunate in that they have some extra cash sitting in their bank account that they're not currently using. And a lot of them were very concerned about moving any funds into like a money market or a CD or some other type of non-deposit account. And a deposit account is going to be, a checking and a savings account. As long as the chapter board votes on that, not only the opening of the account, but also how much money should be transferred into that account, there's nothing wrong with that. All financial institutions, you're guaranteed up to $250,000 in FDIC insurance coverage based on your EIN number. So unless you've got a lot of money sitting in the bank, you're going to be covered should the bank have any issues. I think, oh, sorry, while we're talking about banks, one more last thing, then I'm going to shut up. On bank accounts, if any chapter has staff, it's especially if there's an executive director, whatever you title the staff person, you should always, at minimum, if you have staff and you've authorized your staff to be able to spend money on behalf of the organization, sign checks, etc., you should always have that staff person and at least one board member, if not two board members, as signers on your bank account. And that should also be voted on at a board meeting. So if you have any staff, let's say you have 4 staff people. I don't think we have any chapters that have 4, but I'm just going to say you have 4. Maybe the executive director is a signer on the account, and maybe your secretary and your treasurer are also signers on the account. But realistically, you should have at least one staff person if you have staff and one board member on your account, preferably 2. If you don't have any staff, I would suggest having at least 2 board members on your checking account, on all your bank accounts. And realistically, one of those signers should be the treasurer because they are in charge of the finances. So maybe president, treasurer, secretary, treasurer, vice president, treasurer. Again, treasurer should always be kind of the standard, the default. And then maybe the board wants to talk about, well, hey, who lives closest to the bank? Who's the second most financially responsible person at our chapter, whatever it may be. But that also makes sure, like, if you only have one signer on there and that person dies for whatever reason, it's kind of tough to get back into your bank account without some court order. So I would just suggest you have at least 2 signers on your bank account. And that also kind of complies with what I mentioned earlier about writing checks and having 2 signers on there. So that's all I've got as some very common financial best practices. And we can chat about some more, but I'm going to shut up now and pass it off to Miss Kaysee, who is, for all intents and purposes, the CPA for all of SORBA, not just SORBA Maine. She assists a lot of the chapters as well, and pass it off to her for some more tax-related common best practices.
Yay! Thank you, Dan. You actually did talk about a lot of the stuff I was going to talk about, so good job. You know a lot, which is good. as a treasurer. And I hope that a lot of other ones learn this, because I feel like the biggest things for each chapter is making sure that you go to that link I sent you, look at your state, and making sure that you're staying compliant with your state. And everybody, as far as it comes to taxes, knows that as a nonprofit, you need to be filing a 990. And a lot of you all are probably under the 50K, which means you get the 990 easy, which is literally just like a little postcard. You can fill it out online. It's your chapter information. You confirm that you're under 50K as far as donations, any money in, all gross income counts. So if you're under 50, you just file that. If you're between the 50,000 and 200,000, you're going to be a 990 in, which will be a little bit harder. And I definitely think that you need a CPA or an accountant to do that for you. And if you guys do need help with that, I would love to help with that as well. But as far as the monthly bookkeeping goes, it's kind of hard to like give everyone the best practice for everyone, because every chapter is so different. Like I have worked with one of the chapters that uses a spreadsheet because they have 10 transactions a year. So it doesn't make sense for them to get a QuickBooks. But they do also have it in their bylaws that they have somebody audit it to make sure it's good. And I did that for them. And I think one of the biggest things is if you do have a spreadsheet, it looks like a general ledger, which means basically you have your debit, credit, or money out, money in, and then you have your bank balance. And like a lot of times we always keep the bank balance number off of there. And that's how you know that you've reconciled it. So like if that bottom number adds up to what's on the bank statement, you're good. So don't just put debit and credits in there according to what happens in your transactions online. Take a bank statement, reconcile it every single month. Save those bank statements, as Dan said, and always have those on hand. So definitely doing that. And then, you know, a step up from that would of course be having, sorry, I was getting distracted by the link. Dan dropped us a link, but it's not the link he mentioned, but it's close. I get easily distracted, sorry. But back to that. So a step up from spreadsheets would be getting QuickBooks, which is what we use with SORBA Maine. We do QuickBooks online because it's easily accessed from any computer, anywhere. If there's really just one person using the QuickBooks, I do actually highly recommend QuickBooks Desktop, but you can't use on Apple. You have to have an HP. It's just a bit easier and friendlier to use than the QuickBooks Online. But QuickBooks Online is obviously fine because we use it. So digging into the QuickBooks as an accountant, what they're going to be looking for is that you have a P&L, which is your profit and loss, and you have your balance sheet, which is, this is where I might get too deep. So we're not going to go too far into it. But the biggest thing I have learned within coming into many, like I've worked as an accountant for many types of people and come in midway through their business, and the way that they're classifying things is inaccurate. So I think it's just knowing what is income, what is an expense, what is an asset, what is a liability, and what is equity. And the simplest way would be to just know, like, if I'm looking at a P&L, it should only be the actual money in and then the actual money out.
Yep.
And then
You go potty.
assets is going to be as simple as like, what is an asset? It's cash. So it's what I should be able to do is at the end of the year, 12/31, my balance sheet should equal the exact amount that's in my bank for cash. Like that's it. And that's what's going to be your asset number. If it's not, then you did something wrong. We need to reconcile the bank statement. And of course, that would be like where you put your bank statement, your credit cards, all that great stuff. And I feel like without getting into the weeds, that's the easiest way to put that. But what I highly recommend is if you're very confused is to reach out through an email. We can set up a phone call, any of that. Like I'm always open to coming in and reviewing QuickBooks. I've reviewed QuickBooks for 10 years. So I am a master at being able to figure it out. So even if you did it wrong, I can help you fix it. So do not be shy, reach out. I'm not going to give an accounting lesson because I feel like I understand it. And then 50% of the world doesn't understand it. And I don't actually know how to tell you to understand it. So if you need help, please let me know. I'm here for it. One thing I do want to say, like within filling out your 990, your accountant will need to know if you have any major donors. So making sure that like if you ever collect over $5,000 from one person, go ahead and get their information. And that's their, I don't think you need their social, but you do need their social. And if it's a company, you need their EIN and you need their address. So it's just a way for the IRS to keep major donors, have a list. So when they say, oh, we donated $10,000 to SORBA, we have a way to back it up. So it's just like a little cusp of money that they have. And then also, if you pay a contractor over $500 in the year, immediately get a W-9 or their address, social, or EIN. So just getting that information ahead of time so that, you know, come April, your accountant's like, hey, did you send out the 1099s for these people? And you're like, what? And they're like, well, you paid $2,000 to Joe to do some advertising work for you. You need to send them a 1099 and you get their information. It's too late. You can't remember how to get a hold of them. It all happens. So just making sure if you collect money over 5,000, getting all that information. If you pay anybody over 500, collecting that information as well. And then
and that's really going to be important, Kaysee. I would assume if there's any new trails being built by like an outside trail organization coming in, like that, you should be getting a W-9 and COI from them, but certificate of insurance from them before you get started. But especially on the W-9 side, that way you mail it to whatever address is on their W-9, and if they don't get it, that's their problem.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, I didn't even think about that because we don't really build trail with the SORBA main. But yeah, like that proof of insurance file is always good. And in QuickBooks, there's actually a way to record that stuff as soon as you get it. Like you can upload the W-9, you can upload the POI, and then it'll have all that in there for whenever you need it. What else should I add on for you all? That's really it, because we talked about each state in that link. I was hoping that people would have questions for me and I would be able to help them figure it out.
And one other thing, sorry, go ahead, Philip.
In basis to the W-9, can you talk a little bit about raffle winnings and that type of thing?
Yes, so we actually just had a big conversation on this when we were filling out our 990. So if you raffle off stuff and people have to pay for the raffle, it is actually considered gambling and you need to collect that information. And there's a lot of things that could happen within that. Like if you raffle off a bike, then you have to raffle off not only how you have to also do the taxes if it's over amount. So the way around this is to do a sweepstakes, which is you pay for the first ticket and then the rest of them are free. So everybody like pays $1. So if somebody, how did that? No, we give one out for free and then they pay for the extra. That's what it was. So a sweepstakes is you give everyone one person, like everyone gets one free raffle. It is no longer considered gambling. So that's a fun fact.
The government makes everything way too complicated.
Yeah, and I didn't actually, this was not on any of my CPA exams, nothing like gambling was and what that is, but it was never, I never thought about it from this point of view as a nonprofit or any type of business, you know, raffling off stuff. If you don't give one free ticket out, you have to consider that as gambling income to that person. So you have to fill out a whole different 1099-G. And then if it's over a certain amount, you also have to collect the tax that they owe and pay it in. And if you decide to pay the tax for them, then they now have that amount that they won, whatever it is, like say the bike's worth 6,000 plus whatever the amount of taxes that you paid in, because we are basically giving them that money. So basically, if you ever get in that situation, you should probably give me a call. So, or just give one ticket for free. So,
Well, in certain states, raffles are also illegal, so you would want to check with which state that you reside in, because I know Alabama specifically, raffles are illegal, because it's a non-gambling state. They don't allow any sort of gambling in the state of Alabama. So those are things that
Tennessee.
people don't think of, but you need to do.
Yeah, like Tennessee, because there's no gambling. Are we allowed to do raffles?
I have no idea.
That's a good question to figure out because I know of some chapters that do that. So that is definitely something to keep your eye out on, including
And
myself. So
there was one thing I failed to mention that I think is also pretty important. Whenever you're electing officers, try not to have the same person be treasurer or in the same officer position for like 5 or 10 years. It's good to have, even if it's the same 4 people, please change positions every so often, and change signers on the bank account. It just looks very, 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 and Kaysee can echo this on the tax side. The government does not like seeing the same treasurer for a nonprofit for like 10 plus years. 5 to 10 years you could probably be okay with. Less than 5 years is great. But having a regular set of officer turnover is extremely important, just to continue to promote transparency, and make sure that there's no funny stuff going on. Because even if there's not funny stuff going on, the government will think you have funny stuff going on if the same person's treasurer for like 10, 15 plus years. So regular board turnover is extremely important.
yeah, I think one of the things for audits, like red flags that we learned was I'm pretty sure that if they don't have a turnover of 2 years, that would be a flag. And if it's over 5 years, like that's actually a problem. So I would say minimum 5 years for sure. So yes to that question. And say like, Dan can be our treasurer for 5 years. If we get it audited, like maybe halfway through that, it looks better. So like having other eyes on it. So this is a question that I probably should know, but Dan, since you're the treasurer, like, is there ever a treasurer that also keeps the books?
So it's been my viewpoint that I am a treasurer as an officer. I
Yeah.
am not a functional treasurer, meaning I am not maintaining GL. I am not maintaining the bookkeeping on a regular basis. Obviously, if for whatever reason you were not available, I don't even have access to our QuickBooks. But
Yeah.
I know that I could get access to it should I need it for whatever reason, or if I wanted to review it myself. I, as treasurer, am signer on all of SORBA's bank accounts. And other thing I failed to mention in the very first part, we have every.org, which is great. So if you don't have a way to receive credit cards or other forms of donations and you want to get set up, Jen is on the call, and I'm sure Jen can speak to that. And you can obviously email us, but I cannot tell you, since the summit and we had this presentation, I love getting all of these emails with money being donated every day through every.org. The Florida chapters, you guys are killing it. Every day there's like $1,000 coming through there, and I think it's awesome. Sorry, off track. But
No, that's good. That's good.
I am not what's considered a functional treasurer because I am not working in the business operationally on a daily basis. I am there to kind of oversee the 30,000-foot view, 10,000-foot view, 5,000-foot view if necessary. And Philip is there as executive director to make sure all the daily stuff is happening. And then you are there reporting to Philip to make sure that all the financial stuff is happening regularly. And if there was ever any kind of questions as to what was going on, per the bylaws, obviously the secretary and or the treasurer would step in and start looking over some of those things.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say I do love the separation of me from SORBA and the fact that I don't make decisions. Like I am strictly here for the numbers and keeping it compliant. Of course, I love SORBA and want them to do well, but I would say if there is a chapter that has a treasurer and they keep the books and all of that, there needs to be somebody reviewing that.
Yes, and I always like I go by the two signature. So every month when you have your board meeting, you're saying what was our beginning balance, what was our ending balance, here's our statement. I always like to go as far as like actually putting a physical signature on the front page of the bank statement along with another board member, and then you note that in the meeting minutes. Hey, we reviewed it, nobody had any questions, sign off on it, move on.
Yeah.
It protects the officers. That is a true CYA. If you don't know what CYA means, you can Google that. But it is a true CYA for the treasurer. I don't want to be touching money. I have no problem touching it, but if I do touch it, I'm going to make sure somebody else sees me touching it and that watches me carry that money to the bank. Or at least has it in a sealed envelope with the signature on there. I'm also on the board of my church, and cash comes in all the time. Most of our church is still cash heavy. And if you are a chapter and you have a big event and there is a lot of cash, always have two people looking through that and just putting a little signature. Hey, here's the total, circle the total, seal the envelope, sign it. Another person signs it, carry it to the bank. And it doesn't get opened until the banker opens it up. That way there's no question on anyone's part about what was in there when you left and what was in there when it got to the bank. Just I can't say that enough. Too many nonprofits, when $5 goes missing, they freak out, and there's a reason for that. But at the same time, just CYA yourself and make sure you're doing right by yourself if you are the treasurer, and you're responsible.
Yeah. Like, I think the biggest thing too within that is if you ever pay cash for stuff, you have to have the receipt, you have to take a photo, you have to upload it. So in 5 years, if you get audited or somebody in the board questions it, you can go back and easily find that and be like, oh, that's what we used it for.
And if you have a person on your board that's going out to purchase something and the chapter does not have a credit card and the board member or whoever it is has been authorized to make the purchase and they go out and purchase it themselves and the chapter is going to reimburse them for that, that's fine. Just make sure that's discussed in your board meeting before they go out and make that purchase so that it's noted in the minutes. And then when they're done, they should be submitting a receipt and an expense reimbursement form to the chapter. That way there's a copy of that receipt, there's a copy of that expense reimbursement, and you know where that money is going. And you can either pay them via Zelle, pay them via check, whatever it may be, as long as it's electronic and you're not just giving them $5,000 cash. There's a paper trail for that. So when in doubt, create the paper trail. If your board member or somebody associated with the chapter has got to go make a purchase, that's fine. But it just needs to be approved and there needs to be an expense form for that.
Yeah. And, something I do every month is not only do I save the bank statement, when I reconcile it, I save a reconciliation summary, a reconciliation detail. So it gives me every bit of information. So if something, like a lot of times with companies, not us or anybody related, but what will happen with companies is people can go back in and change details. And what you have is what you did, how this happened. And that way, if something goes wrong, there's fraud, any of that, that's how you find it. So I don't think we're going to have to deal with that, but you do need to sign or not sign, save every bit of information. Like I say, PayPal statements, credit card statements, Philip and Jen who get reimbursed expenses, they upload an Excel spreadsheet. They label each thing, what it was for specifically, and they give me a picture of the receipt. And then there's a check written out to them. When I put it in QuickBooks, there's all the details. So there's multiple ways that we can figure out why and where this money went there. And that's one thing, like, I love to give clients information on is like, hey, if I was your CPA coming in to audit you, how would you prove something? And that's every time you record a transaction, think about how you can prove that happened and you're good, and save it. Like you have to save it to Google Drive, a hard drive, something, because you can't just be like, oh, that's what this was for. That doesn't count. It does help if you have minutes, but at the end of the day, paper receipts are always the best too, so.
And we're talking very more complex, high level financial stuff. If your
Yeah.
chapter does 10 transactions a year, you're not going to have a problem, but you still need to do the basics of this stuff to make sure that once you get to 15, 20, 30, 40 transactions a year, hopefully as your chapter continues to grow, you already have those best practices in place so that it just kind of transfers over from president to next president, vice president to next vice president, treasurer to next treasurer, secretary to next treasurer, whatever officer titles you have. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and honestly, what their expectations are before they sign up.
Yeah.
Some chapters that have large budgets, those treasurers are going to be a lot busier than a chapter that may have 10 transactions a year, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But you just kind of know what you're signing up for before you get into it. So I can't think of anything else to say unless Philip or Kaysee, if y'all have anything else, I think maybe we just open it up for some questions.
Yeah, because I feel like we could just go into the depths of it. But yeah, I feel like the best thing to do is ask questions and give information so they can reach out when they do have more questions.
And feel free to come off a mute if you're having issues with coming off a mute. You can type it into the chat and I can read them aloud. And but yeah, feel free to fire away with any questions.
So Kaysee, I'm SORBA Tri-Cities treasurer. We're getting ready to start a bike raffle. Who do we talk to make sure we are doing this correctly?
Me and Philip, we just figured out all this stuff, but I am curious. I'm going to open that link up, Philip, and I wonder how we figure out if you can raffle or sweepstakes in Tennessee, like how you did that with Georgia.
It lists all the states that raffles are illegal.
Okay, mine just took me to a weird blue page.
Oh, well.
Yeah, hey, I got a 404 too, but if you just click on the link, Kaysee, it'll take you to the right thing.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Looks like North Carolina's okay.
Tri-Cities though, that's Tennessee, I thought.
That's Tennessee. We have the gambling license or approval for that. We've already applied and gotten that, and we have 90 days to do it.
Oh, okay. You're ahead of.
Some of the issues that you may find if you're trying to do it online, anybody that even tries to participate in a state where gambling is illegal, you're going to run into issues with that.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Is it going to be all in person? How are you going to manage it?
I think they did this last year and I was not a part of it. So I'm trying to figure out all the pieces.
What is it that you're raffling off?
We're doing a bike raffle.
How much is the bike worth?
Oh, we're paying just over 3. Last year, I think they made like $1,500 last year.
But like, how much is the bike itself worth that they would be winning?
Probably 5,000.
Because 5,000 is the exact amount that you would have to like do the tax.
I think it's worth $4,999.
Yeah.
It sounds like it.
Let me look this up. How do you look up by the states? States that it's online. Tennessee's not on it, so you're good.
There's a Secretary of State. What is a raffle? And then you'd probably want to go to that charitable gaming guide and frequently asked questions.
Dang. Okay. I feel like we need to get back to you on this because I don't want to lie to you right now.
Yep.
Yeah, let me just, will you put your information in the chat so I can get a hold of you?
Yeah, let me figure out where to put it. I'm on mobile right now and they changed the app on me.
Oh, yeah. Love it. You don't figure it out, I can write it down. I'm glad I'm not the only boomer here, so it's cool.
Zoom loves to change their app.
They do. Yeah, because I'd also be interested to see what the bike is that you're raffling off. And like, I know that we can say what it's worth, but at the end of the day, if that bike is listed for over 5K, then technically
I know. I was trying to make a joke.
I know,
$4,999.
Here I am just stomping on
YouTube.
I didn't even think about that. Sorry, Andrew.
555-1212.
I don't want Andrew to get phone calls about his car's extended warranty.
Well, I already get those, so it's fine. Okay, any other questions from anybody?
I have a question for everybody on the call. Do you know what your fiscal year is?
Mark says he does.
Okay.
Good.
I do not.
It's in your bylaws. You need to check your bylaws to see what your fiscal year is so that you make sure that you operate underneath that.
Yeah. Brian and Andrew are still thinking about it, so.
Well, Andrew,
I said I don't. I took over, and our president did our taxes last year, is what I was told.
Perfect. Any other questions? I'm gonna put my email in the chat here. So email me with any questions or concerns. Let me make sure I went over everything on my list.
Oops.
I also lied to you earlier. I think I said that the 990 easy, because it sounds like easy was under 50K. It's actually 990 in, which is the postcard, but it doesn't matter. So if you're under 50K, you still do your postcard, and then 50 to 200,000 is actually a 990 easy. Sorry if I told you wrong the first time. And then I gave you all the link, which gives all the information to stay compliant for the states. And then, yeah, I feel like I did give all the information I wanted to. The rest of it is very detailed, so probably should do that.
And I think just real quick, like top level things that you guys should all consider is your Secretary of State registration, forming an annual budget, having 2 signers on your bank account, and making sure that you keep track of all your financial records and upload them to the SORBA drive, because we have plenty of space on the drive to keep track of all this stuff, and we can help with transition if anybody falls off the face of the earth. But if there isn't any other questions, we can close it out. Kaysee, Dan, thank y'all so much for your time and being able and willing to share some knowledge. If you have any questions at all SORBA related, definitely reach out to us, and we're happy to help you as we go. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Kaysee.
Thank you all.
Thank you.